A lot of people, I guess, certainly around the world, have been, really made very, very uncomfortable and nervous about USAID. America is the largest provider of humanitarian assistance, and as you know, it's always been called by the US a vital, tool of soft power. How does closing it down, to all intents and purposes, affect the United States, first of all?
I guess the short answer is it is unclear, but we are about to find out. Listen, I am a Republican. I am a conservative. There are arguably some questions, legitimate questions, about the activity of USAID over the past 4 years. You've seen maybe some political activism under the Biden years. You would be naive not to recognize that. You would be equally, if not even more naive, to not recognize the everyday miracle that USAID and its staff performed around the world in terms of clean water, sanitation, and certainly one of the most central tenets of American foreign policy over the past 20 years, HIV/AIDS treatment and prevention. So this is a very, very unsettling notion. We've seen efforts of reform. Scrutiny is welcomed, continuity is critical, but the notion of closing and extinguishing USAID is more than dangerous, it is deadly.
I'm going to get into some of those crucial elements of what it actually does for people around the world and also for the US. But I want to first play this sort of mashup of sound bites about USAID and about essentially, taking it to the wood chipper, as Elon Musk says. Here's the president, here's the Secretary of State, and here's Elon Musk. Take a listen.
It's been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out. USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out.
They just think they're a global entity and that their master is the globe and not the United States.
As we dug into USAID, it became apparent that what we have here is not an apple with a worm in it, but we have actually just a bowl of worms.
I mean, Matthew Bartlett, from what I think you said before is, yes, there needs to be some accountability and reform, but not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So just describe, do you agree, A, with that characterization of run by a bunch of radical lunatics, that it is, an apple full of worms?
I mean, let's just be clear. Again, I was a Trump appointee at the State Department at PEPFAR in the first administration. We made different choices than the Biden-Harris administration made. Yes, they were run by very progressive individuals, ideologies for the past 4 years. That is how, in part, administrations change. And this is why, when you now come in, a reasonable governing adult would be in charge, would make reforms, would make government and USAID work, not end it. So again, this is a more than a political prism. This is more than reform. This is highly problematic in terms of the outcomes that are desirable for the United States of America. If you are saying that USAID was problematic in the Biden-Harris years, it is equally, if not even more problematic, to then just end it.
Mm-hmm. So can I ask you, because you've raised PEPFAR a couple of times, and I know that you did a lot of work on that, as you mentioned in the first Trump term. We know that PEPFAR was launched by President George W. Bush. It's to provide life-saving care for AIDS patients around the world. And it has saved, according to the figures, some 25 million lives around the world. Just tell me what will happen, and we're already hearing from South Africa and elsewhere that people are being turned away from USAID-provided care in this regard. What will happen? What is the end result of cutting this off?
Christian, that is one of the most key central questions going on in this town and around the world right now. Let's just take a step back here. I reauthorized PEPFAR, or helped reauthorize PEPFAR at the State Department through a Republican House, through a Republican Senate, and signed into law by President Trump in 2018. The world is a better place because of that. We went from 18 million lives to 23 million lives saved while President Trump oversaw PEPFAR. He actually called for an end of HIV/AIDS in America and beyond. So these are all wonderful things. Secretary Rubio has been a long-time champion of PEPFAR, of the world's poorest people. Now, flash forward, when the foreign assistance pause was immediately put into place, it took a few days to have Secretary Rubio issue a waiver for PEPFAR to ensure that critical life-saving program will continue on. but it's a little more complicated than that because PEPFAR is implemented by CDC and USAID on the ground. When they are frozen, when monies are frozen, drugs cannot get out, prevention cannot take place, and again, this throws the entire program into peril.